The valley was broken and black, filled with stone cracks and fire scars. Smoke still rose from the earth as if the ground itself had been burned again and again. People said this valley was cursed. Others whispered a darker truth: it was the home of the dragon's young. No one dared to go near. Even the bravest hunters turned back. For inside the valley, the air was alive with danger. The sound of heavy wings, sharp claws scratching against stone, and fire bursting without warning filled the silence of night. The dragon's young were not like normal hatchlings. They were born from the fire of the dragon emperor himself. Their bodies glowed faintly with heat. Their eyes burned like coals. And their temper, wild, fierce, untamable. Kings had tried to capture them. Sorcerers had tried to bind them with spells. Warriors had marched with swords and shields. All had failed. Chains melted like wax. Spears broke like sticks. Even the strongest magic turned to ash in the presence of their fire. Again and again, people tried. Again and again, the dragon's young destroyed them. And so a legend spread across villages and cities. No one can tame the dragon's young. Far from the valley, in a small village at the edge of the forest, lived a child. His clothes were torn, his feet bare, his hair messy with dust. He had no family, no friends, and no home. People called him cursed. Mothers pulled their children away when he walked near. Farmers shouted when he tried to ask for food. At night, when the villagers closed their doors and lit their warm fires, the child wandered alone under the stars. He would lie on the cold ground, looking up at the sky, whispering softly to himself. "I am not cursed," he would say. "I am just alone." He did not know why the world hated him. But he had learned to survive. He drank from rivers, ate roots and wild berries, and built small fires when he could. Yet his heart was heavy. More than food, more than shelter, he wanted something else. Something no one had ever given him: belonging. One night, as he wandered farther than ever before, he reached the edge of the valley. A strange glow lit the rocks. The air was hot, thick with the smell of smoke. The child crouched behind a broken wall of stone and looked down. His eyes widened. There, in the heart of the valley, moved shadows bigger than horses. Scales glimmered red and black. Tails whipped against the ground, sending sparks into the air. Fire burst from young throats like angry torches. The dragon's young. He had heard the stories. Everyone had. But to see them with his own eyes, wild, fierce, beautiful, was something no words could explain. One hatchling leapt onto a pile of stone, its wings stretching wide. Another roared, a sound that shook the rocks. A third clawed the earth as if it wanted to tear the world apart. The child should have run. His legs trembled, his heart beat fast. But he did not move. Instead, he whispered, "So, it is true. No one can tame them." But as he watched, something strange stirred inside him. It was not fear. It was not hate. It was something softer. Something that made his chest ache. "Lonely," he whispered. "They look lonely." The hatchlings roared and fought with each other, but their eyes, burning bright, looked empty. No parent. No comfort. Only fire and rage. The child understood. He too had lived with emptiness. He too knew what it was like to have no one. Slowly, he stepped out from behind the rock. The hatchlings froze. 6 glowing eyes turned toward him. The child's knees shook. His hands were empty. He had no sword, no shield, no magic, nothing at all. Only his thin body and his beating heart. The largest hatchling snarled, sparks flying from its mouth. Another spread its wings wide, preparing to strike. The boy could not fight. He could not run. So he did something no one had ever done before. He closed his eyes. And he stood still. The valley grew quiet. The hatchlings growled, claws scraping the earth. Heat filled the air, the smell of fire thick. Yet the child did not move. He did not scream. He did not open his eyes. He simply stood, breathing slowly, his small chest rising and falling. Seconds passed. Then a minute. Then 2. The dragons shifted. One stepped closer, its hot breath brushing the boy's face. Another tilted its head, confused. Their fire flickered, but they did not strike. The boy whispered softly, though his eyes stayed closed. "I am not here to chain you. I am not here to hurt you. I am, like you." The sound of his voice was small, almost lost in the vast valley. But it carried truth. It carried something the dragons had never heard before: gentleness. The largest hatchling lowered its head slightly. Its fire dimmed. Another curled its wings close. The third gave a soft rumble, not of anger, but of curiosity. And for the first time in their lives, the dragon's young did not attack. They simply watched. And the lonely child, with his eyes closed and his heart open, stood unburned before them. The night air was heavy with silence. The boy stood with his eyes still closed, feeling the heat of the dragon's young so close that his skin almost burned. His small hands trembled, but he did not move. The dragons did not attack. They circled him, their claws scraping stone, their breath hot and smoky. One let out a low growl, but it was not full of rage, it was full of question. Finally, after what felt like hours, the boy slowly opened his eyes. The hatchlings were still there, watching him. Their eyes glowed red, their chests rising with fire inside. Yet they did not strike. The boy's heart beat fast, but he whispered, "You did not burn me." The largest hatchling tilted its head, like it was curious. The boy almost smiled. But then he remembered where he was. He was just a poor child, and they were dragons, creatures of fire, born from the Emperor's flame. He took a slow step back. The hatchlings hissed, fire sparking in their mouths. The boy froze. He understood, they wanted him to stay. And so he sat on the ground. His thin body looked even smaller in the wide, burning valley. The dragons lowered their heads, watching him carefully. The night stretched long, and slowly, the boy fell asleep beside them. When the sun rose, the valley glowed red and gold. The boy woke to the sound of wings. The hatchlings were playing, roaring, scratching at rocks, sending sparks into the air. But none of them hurt him. He rubbed his eyes, unsure if it was all a dream. "Why?" he whispered. "Why do you not hate me?" Of course, the dragons gave no answer. But their eyes, sharp and burning, seemed to see into his heart. The boy thought of the village, of the way people always looked at him. Mothers pulling their children away. Men shouting when he asked for bread. Doors closing in his face. He thought of nights spent alone in the cold, with no one to hold his hand, no one to whisper his name. He whispered to the dragons, "You are like me, aren't you? Alone. Angry. Forgotten." The hatchlings rumbled. One of them crept closer, its scales glowing faintly. The boy did not move. The creature lowered its head until its glowing eye was level with his face. The boy could see fire swirling deep inside. He smiled sadly. "I think I understand you." Far away, in the village, people whispered about the boy's absence. Some said he had wandered into the cursed valley and died. Others laughed, saying the dragons must have eaten him in one bite. No one went to look for him. No one cared. To them, he was a cursed child, nothing more. But in the valley, something was changing. Day after day, the boy returned. At first, he came with fear, but slowly, the fear faded. He brought no weapons, no food, no gifts. Only himself. Sometimes he sat quietly, closing his eyes as he had done the first night. Other times he spoke softly, telling the dragons about the stars he watched, the dreams he had, the loneliness he carried. "You are the first to listen," he told them one evening as the sun bled across the sky. "No one else ever listens." The hatchlings would not answer, but they did not leave him either. They stayed near, their eyes fixed on him as if his voice was fire they could not turn away from. One night, a storm struck the valley. Lightning split the sky, thunder shook the ground, and rain fell hard. The boy ran for cover, hiding under a broken wall of stone. He shivered, cold and soaked. A loud growl came from above. He looked up and gasped. One of the dragon hatchlings had curled its wing over him, shielding him from the rain. The boy touched the wet, glowing scale. Heat spread into his fingers. "Thank you," he whispered. His eyes filled with tears. It was the first time in his life someone, or something, had protected him. That night, as he fell asleep under the dragon's wing, the boy no longer felt cursed. For the first time, he felt chosen. But danger was never far. From the cliffs above, eyes were watching. A scarred man in armor stood with a group of hunters. They had followed the boy and seen everything. "The stories are true," the scarred man whispered. "No one could tame the dragon's young, but this child, he has done it." The men looked at each other in fear and greed. "If a child can calm them, then we can use the child," the scarred man said, his voice cold. "Through him, we will control the dragons. And with dragons, the world will belong to us." He gave a cruel smile, his eyes never leaving the boy below. Soon, he said. The child will not keep them for himself. The hunters slipped away into the darkness, leaving the boy unaware of the shadow now following him. In the valley, the boy slept peacefully. The dragons slept near him, their fire dim but warm, their bodies curled like guardians. He dreamed of laughter. He dreamed of a family. He dreamed of belonging. But outside the valley, the world was stirring. And the secret of the lonely child and the dragon's young was no longer safe. The sun sank low over the valley, painting the sky red like fire. The boy sat on a flat stone, his thin legs dangling, while the dragon's young played around him. One spread its wings and leapt into the air, falling again with a heavy crash. Another blew sparks at a pile of rocks, turning them into glowing ash. The third clawed the earth, making deep lines in the ground. They were wild, fierce, dangerous. Yet, strangely, they stayed close to him. The boy laughed softly, though his voice was quiet. "You are strong. You are free. But you are not cruel, are you?" The largest hatchling turned its head, as if it understood his words. 4 days now, the boy had returned. Each time, he carried nothing but his voice, his silence, and his beating heart. He had learned their moods, the rumbling growl that meant warning, the sharp hiss that meant play, the long roar that meant hunger. He could not explain why, but they did not see him as an enemy. And he did not see them as monsters. Instead, they met each other in a strange, fragile bond. But the boy was not the only one watching. From the cliffs above, the scarred man and his hunters returned. Their eyes glowed with greed. "There," the scarred man whispered, pointing. "Look how close they let him sit. No chains. No magic. Nothing. The boy is the key." One of the hunters trembled. "But the dragons will kill us if we go near." The scarred man's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Not if we take the child first." The others exchanged uneasy glances, but they followed his command. Quietly, like wolves, they crept down the cliffs. The boy was sitting cross-legged now, speaking softly to the dragons. "I think you are like me," he whispered. "You have no one to hold you. No one to guide you. You are alone, like I am." The hatchlings listened in silence. Their eyes, glowing with fire, watched every move of the small human before them. And then, without warning, the boy did something strange. He closed his eyes. He leaned back against a warm rock and whispered, "If you want to burn me, you can. But I will not run. I trust you." The dragons growled low. Their claws dug into the stone. One leaned close, its hot breath washing over his face. Still, the boy kept his eyes closed, calm and steady. And then, it happened. The largest hatchling lowered its body beside him. Its massive head rested close to his small frame. Its fire dimmed. Its eyes softened. The boy opened his eyes slowly. And he smiled. "You are not monsters." The hunters froze where they stood. "By the gods," one whispered. "He has tamed them." The scarred man's smile widened. "No, he has not tamed them. He has something better. He has their trust." His hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. "And soon, that trust will belong to us." Suddenly, one of the dragons hissed. Its sharp eyes turned to the cliffs. The boy followed its gaze, his breath catching. Shadows moved against the rock. The hunters had been seen. The largest hatchling roared, a burst of fire exploding from its throat. The sound shook the valley like thunder. The boy stumbled back, covering his ears. Figures stepped into the open. Men in dark armor, carrying nets, chains, and spears. The boy's heart froze. "No," he whispered. The scarred man stepped forward, his eyes cold. "So, it is true. A child and dragons. What a gift." The boy shook his head, stepping back. "Don't. They are not yours." The scarred man laughed harshly. "Not mine. Then whose are they, boy?" "Yours." His voice dripped with cruelty. "You are nothing. Alone. Weak. But with you, we can take them. And when we do, kings will kneel before us." The boy clenched his fists, fear and anger burning in his chest. "I will not let you hurt them." The hunters spread out, forming a circle. Nets were raised, chains rattled. The dragons roared, their wings spreading wide, fire bursting from their throats. The valley shook with rage and fear. And in the center stood the boy, his heart torn. He was small, powerless. But he had one thing none of the hunters had, courage to stand without greed. The scarred man pointed forward. "Take the child." The hunters rushed. The boy closed his eyes again, his voice a whisper against the roar. "Please, trust me." The dragon's young moved as one. Their wings swept down, sending blasts of hot wind that knocked men back. Fire roared from their mouths, turning nets to ash, melting chains before they could touch the boy. The hunters screamed, stumbling in fear. The scarred man raised his sword, but even he was forced to step back under the force of their fury. The boy opened his eyes. He was surrounded by fire, yet untouched. The hatchlings had formed a circle around him, their bodies shielding him like guardians. For the first time, the boy did not feel small. He felt chosen. The scarred man's eyes narrowed as he pulled back. His men fled in terror, but his voice cut through the chaos. "This is not the end, boy," he shouted. "You cannot hide forever. The world will hear of this. And when it does, armies will come. Armies far greater than us." His words echoed in the valley as he vanished into the shadows with his hunters. The boy stood shaking, the dragons still guarding him. His heart pounded, his hands trembling, but his eyes burned with new fire. He whispered softly, "I will protect you, just as you protect me." The dragons gave a low rumble, their fire glowing warm, not angry. And in that moment, the bond between the lonely child and the untamable dragon's young was sealed. But in the distance, darkness was already rising. The night after the hunters' attack was heavy with smoke. The valley smelled of burned chains and melted steel. Broken nets lay scattered like dead snakes. The boy sat in the middle of the ruins, his small hands pressed against his chest. Around him, the dragons young lay close. Their glowing scales flickered like dim fire, their wings folded, their eyes half closed. They had fought for him. They had chosen to stand beside him. The boy whispered, his voice shaking, "You saved me." "Why?" The largest hatchling shifted, letting out a low rumble. It was not an answer, but it was something, an echo of understanding. The boy touched the ground, his fingers trembling. "I do not deserve you. I am only a lonely child. But maybe you are lonely too." He closed his eyes, just as he had done the first night. The valley grew quiet. The dragons stirred but did not move away. Instead, they lowered themselves around him, forming a circle of glowing fire. Their breaths came slow, their heat steady and calm. The silence was deep, but not empty. It was a silence of trust. And in that silence, something invisible formed, a bond no chains could make, no magic could break. The next morning, the boy awoke with the sun on his face. The dragons were still there, their bodies curled around him like walls of living flame. He rose to his feet, brushing dust from his torn clothes, and smiled. "I am not alone any more," he whispered. The hatchlings rumbled softly, as if answering. 4 days, he stayed with them. He learned their moods better, the way their tails lashed when they were angry, the way their fire dimmed when they were calm, the way their eyes glowed brighter when they were curious. He spoke to them often, not knowing if they understood. But it did not matter. For every word, they stayed near. And when he grew quiet, they did not leave. At night, when the stars burned above, the boy would lie on the ground with his eyes closed. The dragons would curl around him, their bodies warm against the cold wind. He no longer felt the bite of loneliness. He no longer dreamed of hunger or fear. He dreamed of wings. But beyond the valley, whispers spread. Hunters carried tales to villages and towns. "A child walks with the dragon's young," they said. "He sits among them and they do not kill him." Some laughed, calling it madness. Others listened with fear. Kings in their halls leaned forward, their eyes sharp. If it was true, if a mere child could calm the dragons, then perhaps the dragons could be taken. Controlled. Used as weapons of war. The scarred man's voice carried far, "The boy is the key. Through him, the untamable can be tamed." And so, unseen by the child, greed and danger marched closer every day. Back in the valley, the boy watched the dragons play. One spread its wings and leapt high into the sky, its shadow cutting across the rocks. Another roared, its fire bursting like a small sun. The third clawed at stone until sparks flew. The boy laughed softly. "You are strong, but not cruel. You are wild, but not wicked. You are free." He thought of the villagers who called him cursed. He thought of the hunters who wanted to chain the dragons. He thought of kings who would hear of this. "They will come for you," he whispered. "But I will not let them." The dragons turned their burning eyes toward him. He felt their gaze deep in his heart. He closed his eyes again. And the valley fell silent. Something happened then. The largest hatchling stepped forward, pressing its forehead lightly against the boy's chest. Heat rushed through him, but it did not burn. It was warm, steady, alive. The boy gasped, his eyes opening. He touched the dragon's scale with his small hand. You trust me." The hatchling rumbled low, the sound rolling like thunder but soft. One by one, the other hatchlings followed. They lowered their heads, touching the boy lightly, their fire dim but warm. The boy's eyes filled with tears. "I have nothing, no family, no home, but now, I have you." The bond of silence had grown into something stronger, loyalty. Far above, hidden in shadows, the scarred man watched again. His eyes narrowed. "Look," he whispered to his men. "Do you see? They bow to him. They answer his silence. He is their bond." One hunter trembled. "Should we strike now?" The scarred man shook his head. "No. Not yet. The boy is not ready. But when the world comes for him, when kings send their armies, he will break. And when he breaks, we will take everything." His voice was cold, his eyes burning with greed. Back below, the boy sat with the dragons, his hand resting on glowing scales. He felt no fear, no loneliness. For the first time in his life, he belonged. But in his heart, he knew the truth. The world would not let this bond remain in peace. The world would come. And when it did, the bond of silence would be tested in fire. The valley was quiet, but not empty. The boy sat on a broken stone, the dragon's young lying close around him. Their scales glowed faintly in the dusklight, their breath warm against the cool air. The boy traced shapes on the dusty ground with his finger. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why do you not burn me, when you burn everyone else?" The dragons rumbled softly, their eyes watching him with steady fire. They gave no answer, but something in their gaze felt older, deeper. That night, as the stars filled the sky, the boy dreamed. He dreamed of a fire greater than the sun. He dreamed of wings that stretched across mountains. He dreamed of a roar so loud it shook the heavens. In his dream, he saw not hatchlings, but the dragon emperor himself, the father of fire. His eyes were endless flame, his body as vast as the world. And then the emperor spoke, his voice echoing inside the boy's heart. "They are my young, my fire, my blood. No man may chain them, for they are born of freedom. But you, child, you carry what others have lost. You carry emptiness. You carry silence. You carry truth." The boy trembled. "Why me?" The emperor's voice rolled like thunder. "Because only one who knows loneliness can understand theirs. Only one who has no greed can hold their trust. This is the secret, boy. The dragons young cannot be tamed. They can only be understood." The dream ended. The boy woke with a gasp. The hatchlings were still there, their heads close, their fire glowing steady. His eyes widened. You chose me." The largest hatchling stepped closer, pressing its head against his shoulder. Heat surged into him, but it was not cruel. It was warm, steady, alive. The boy's hands shook as he touched its scale. "Then I am not cursed," he whispered. "I am chosen." But the world outside did not see it that way. The scarred man spread word through taverns and castles. His voice carried far. "A child walks with the dragons young. They bow to him. He is their bond. If we take him, the dragons will follow." Kings leaned forward in their thrones. Sorcerers whispered in their towers. Armies were summoned, greedy eyes burning with desire. Some wanted the dragons for war. Some wanted them for power. Others wanted them destroyed before they grew too strong. And so, across the land, men began to march toward the valley. The boy did not know this. He sat among the dragons, speaking softly. "People will come for you," he whispered. "They will not understand. They will see only weapons, not hearts." The dragons growled low, as if they too felt the danger coming. The boy closed his eyes, breathing deeply. "But I will stay with you, no matter what." That evening, as the sun sank, the scarred man returned to the cliffs with his hunters. "Look at him," one whispered. "He sits like he belongs to them." The scarred man's eyes burned with greed. "He does not belong to them. He belongs to us. Through him, the dragons will be ours." But even he did not understand the truth. The bond was not of control, but of trust. That night, The boy dreamed again. This time, the Dragon Emperor's voice was sharper. "Child, listen. Soon the world will come. They will bring fire and steel. They will come for you, and for my young. But remember, strength is not in chains. Strength is in silence. Hold your heart steady, and they will stand with you." The boy whispered in his dream, "I am small. I am weak. How can I stand against armies?" The Emperor's voice rumbled. "You are not weak. You are keeper of the bond. You are proof that the fire of dragons answers not to power, but to truth." The boy woke with tears in his eyes. He pressed his small hand against the glowing scale of the nearest hatchling. "I will not leave you," he whispered. The dragon lowered its head, as if it understood. Far above, lightning split the sky. Storm clouds rolled in, heavy and dark. The valley shuddered with the sound of distant marching. The scarred man stood on the cliffs, watching the glow of the dragons below. "Soon," he muttered, his voice hard, "the boy will see the truth. He thinks he has found family. But when fire and steel come, he will break. And when he breaks, the dragons will be mine." His men shivered in the cold wind, but his smile only grew sharper. In the valley, the boy sat in silence, the dragons curled around him. He felt the storm in the air, the weight of danger coming closer. But for the first time in his life, he did not feel afraid. He closed his eyes, and the bond of silence grew stronger, glowing between him and the dragon's young like an invisible fire. He whispered, "We will face it together." The dragons rumbled softly, their eyes glowing brighter. And in the distance, thunder rolled. The world was coming. The storm broke over the valley like 1,000 drums. Lightning split the sky, rain fell in heavy sheets, and thunder roared across the mountains. The boy stood with the dragons young around him, their scales glowing like embers in the storm. He felt the ground tremble. Far away, the sound of marching grew louder, shields, swords, and boots striking the earth. The world was coming. The boy pressed his hand against the largest hatchling. "Stay with me," he whispered. "We will not run." The dragons rumbled, their eyes burning bright. Soon, the armies arrived. Men in armor filled the cliffs, their torches glowing against the storm. Flags of kings whipped in the wind. Sorcerers stood among them, their staffs crackling with power. Hunters carried nets and chains, eyes wide with greed. At the front stood the scarred man. His smile was cruel, his voice loud. "Child," he shouted across the valley, "you cannot keep them. They are not yours. They belong to us all. Step aside, and you will live. Resist, and you will burn with them." The boy shook his head, his voice trembling but firm. "They are not yours. They are not mine. They are free. You will not take them." The scarred man's smile turned into a snarl. "Then you will die." He raised his hand. Thousands of voices roared. Arrows were notched. Magic sparked. Nets were lifted. And the army charged. The boy closed his eyes. He felt fire in his chest, steady and strong. He whispered, "Please, trust me." The dragons young roared as one. Their wings beat against the storm, sending waves of heat across the valley. Fire burst from their throats, meeting arrows and turning them to ash. Chains melted in midair. Magic shattered like glass. The army stumbled back in fear, their cries lost in thunder. The boy stood in the center, unharmed, the dragons forming a blazing circle around him. He opened his eyes. His small body shook, but his gaze burned with new fire. "I am not cursed," he shouted. His voice carried over the storm. "I am their bond. And they will not bow to greed." The scarred man roared in rage, drawing his sword. He charged down the cliff, his men following. But the largest hatchling slammed its wings into the ground, shaking the valley. Fire exploded around the scarred man, forcing him back. He raised his sword again, but the boy stepped forward, his hand lifted. "No," the boy whispered. For a moment, silence fell. The scarred man froze. He stared at the child, standing small but unbroken among fire. For the first time, fear touched his eyes. The storm raged. The armies faltered. And then, above the valley, a roar shook the heavens. The boy looked up in awe. Through the storm clouds, a shadow vast and endless appeared. Wings stretched across the sky, larger than mountains. Eyes like suns burned through the rain. It was the Dragon Emperor. The armies fell to their knees, terror in their hearts. Even the scarred man dropped his sword, his face pale. The emperor's voice rolled like thunder. Fools! Did you think fire could be chained? Did you think greed could rule my young? You bring war, and you will leave with nothing. The soldiers trembled, but the boy did not. He stood still, his eyes wide but steady. The emperor's gaze turned to him. And you, child, keeper of silence, you have given what no king could, trust without chains. For this, the bond will live. The boy's voice shook. I am small. I am weak. But I will protect them. The emperor rumbled, his voice softening. You are not weak. You are chosen. And with that, the shadow lifted, the roar fading into the storm. The armies broke. Men fled down the cliffs, throwing away their chains and nets. Sorcerers vanished into the rain. Even the scarred man stumbled back, his eyes full of hatred but his body broken by fear. This is not the end, he shouted before vanishing into the storm. The valley grew quiet again. The storm faded. Rain turned to mist. The boy fell to his knees, exhausted, tears mixing with the rain. The dragon's young curled around him, warm and steady. He whispered, We made it. Together. The dragons lowered their heads, their fire glowing softly in the dark. The boy smiled, weak but true. This is a new beginning. Days later, the valley was still. The boy sat on his stone, watching the dragons play. They leapt and roared, their fire rising into the sky. He laughed, his heart light. He was no longer lonely, no longer cursed. He was the keeper of the bond. But far away, in hidden castles and shadowed towers, whispers still spread. Kings plotted, sorcerers planned, and hunters sharpened their blades. The world was not finished with the boy and the dragons. And the scarred man's voice still echoed in the dark.